Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Hey Sunshine. And today I have the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Jae West on all things body image, self-worth, and her journey back to loving her body. So Jae is a certified erotic blueprint coach, a dancer, an actor, inspirational speaker, and has a PhD graduate. She's dedicated her life to inspiring individuals to reach their highest potential through movement, mind, emotions, and spirit. And just a quick side note, Blake and I have been working closely with Jae on the Erotic Blueprint for the past, I think it's 2 months now, and we have been absolutely loving it. So Jae, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited you're here as well. And you're over in Perth. So I love that we can just connect over Zoom and it's just so easy. Actually, do you know what? I feel like I'm going to start that again. This is the first time I'm going to start again, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
I just stumbled in the first bit, so I've never done this before. I've always just run all the way through, but I'm going to do it one more time.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Trust yourself.
I know. Sorry. I feel like this week, because I'm in launch week, I'm like, okay, oh my God, all the things coming up for me, but that's all right.
Okay. That's the beauty of technology. We can just do it again.
I know.
That's fine.
Sorry, I've never done that. So anyway, I'll be on after this.
Let's do it.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Hey Sunshine. I'm here today with Jae West, and we are talking all things body image, self-worth, and her journey back to loving her body. So Jae is a certified erotic blueprint coach, a dancer, an actor, an inspirational speaker, and has a PhD and is a PhD graduate. She's dedicated her life to inspiring individuals to reach their highest potential through movement, mind, emotions, and spirit. And a quick side note, Blake and I have been working with Jae for the past 2 months through her Erotic Blueprint coaching program and absolutely loving it. So Jae, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. So thank you for being here for one, but I really love to start off this conversation and just with a question about magic. And what does magic mean to you?
Oh, great question straight off the bat. Wow.
It's like a warm-up question, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I am one of those people that feel like I'm split in two worlds. So I do have a PhD in health psychology and exercise physiology, so very rooted in science. So one part of me goes logical of like, well, magic is like, a lot of the time is science, especially when you think of the stereotypical magic tricks and things like that. I actually even do some of those science experiments with kids sometimes to create that discussion around what magic is and looking at the science. But then the other part of me goes, well, sometimes things in life happen, beyond what I can predict and beyond what I rationally can understand. And so magic is those moments of synchronicity or those moments where I can't explain it with my logical mind. So I could answer it in two ways. One is very scientific and one is very I don't know.
Well, it's woo-woo, and that's what this podcast is all about,
I like both, and I really encourage that people can live in both worlds. We don't need to separate them.
100%. And I do love, even in your work and the things you do, it is that mixture of woo-woo and science. And, even to that point of synchronicity, like walking down the street and bumping into, someone you haven't seen in 5 years, that can't be explained by science. That's magic. So I absolutely love your answer. And it's just my favorite question because everyone answers it so different. And it really just highlights magic is all around us. We just have to open our eyes. So thank you for that. And I want to sort of dive into your journey and what led you to do the work you do, because you're so multifaceted in your work and your professions. And I love hearing people's backstories, how they got to where they are today.
Yeah. So yes, multifaceted is definitely one way of explaining it. When I think about my life, I use the word colorful. And so like the science and arts perspective that I've already talked into, I originally started with a science degree and I did my honors and PhD. So that was a lot using my logical brain. I loved academia. I love learning. I love going down the rabbit hole of understanding why things are the way they are. But the whole time that I was doing my science degree, I was also dancing for drag queens and being introduced to this whole different world and these different perspectives. Because I'd gone to a private all-girls school, I was in our standard like metropolitan area, so a very vanilla upbringing.
Yeah.
And then at a very young age, going and being exposed to all of these different people from different walks of life and feeling just as much as I belonged there as, the people that I'd been spending my whole childhood with. And so it really created a great acceptance and a love for understanding people in general, and knowing that every single person has something to share, some wisdom that they've attained. And really, I don't know a lot about anything, but at the same time, I know my own journey. So I have something to share and someone else has something to share. So that's kind of taken me down a few different rabbit holes. So dancing has been an anchor point for a lot of what I've done. It's kind of the thread that keeps going through everything. But in saying that, when you are dancing, you're also starting to explore different like feminine expressions or roles. And so I realized this passion for acting as well, which I'd done at a young age, but I kind of polarized myself into just focusing on science and forgot that actually trying on these different characters, having fun, playing around was at like the core of my joy as well. And then through synchronicities, through life, different opportunities came towards me. I met new people, one of which being a very, very dear friend now called Peter Sharp, who I then helped found The Liberators with. So a social movement around looking at some topics within society and then creating artistic expressions or social experiments that show a different light or a different way of being in the world. Very heavily focused on connection, self-expression and self-empowerment, so body image in particular for me. So that was never planned. That, like, my life most of the time is never planned. It's like just meeting each person and being inspired by who they are then led me to the next stepping stone. And so it was always a feedback loop of, what's life giving me? How does it feel in my body? Oh, that feels inspiring. Let's go down that pathway. So that's part of it. That's also how I then later on found the Erotic Blueprints, which is now a cornerstone of what I do, which is looking at how our sexuality is expressed in different ways. Again, I kind of like the fact that it's like roles or different archetypes. And so there's a way of like categorizing the ways that we are and finding easy life hacks into being able to express those different blueprints or those different archetypes. So I could probably go on for ages just with what I do. So, but they seem to be the cornerstone of letting life inspire me, and my work just being a reflection of, in that moment, what am I being inspired by? And actually, with that, it's a really interesting concept. So I've been talking to a lot of my housemates about this recently, and we are in an age now where our job, our identity, our role can be ever changing. So some people do find their one thing that, like, yes, this is who I am, this is what I'm passionate about. So dancing is an element of that for me. But there is such an encouragement now to go, oh yeah, I'm a dancer, but I'm also this, and I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this. And at different times of our life, we can actually fluctuate through these different roles. So I love that. And I love that I
well, and I think we can be pigeonholed into, we've got to show up in this way, and, this is my job and I can only show up in this sort of dynamic. And I think, different structures, I'm not sure if you know human design, I'd love to know yours afterwards, but human design really allows us to embrace our uniqueness and embrace our blueprint and show up in these different archetypes or these different profiles or these different energy types, really, and it allows us to just embrace the wholeness of us. So I love that you do that in your work, and you can so see it just in the way you show up on Instagram. It's like one day we're dancing and one day we're doing erotic blueprint, and you know, one day you're having a cup of tea doing like boss bitch stuff on you know, your laptop. So I absolutely love all of that. And I want to go back a little bit further to like your childhood, and really like what was a core driver to working in health and working in health science and working you know, with stuff like body image and eating. So can you talk through your sort of things that happened through childhood that led you to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I've had some moments recently that have reflected back to me this particular journey. So I'll step it back from the beginning. So I grew up in a household that was very health and very fitness orientated. So mum is incredible. She'll be doing a couple of hours of exercise movement, very in tune with her body. Like I grew up doing yoga from the age of 7. Both of my parents still do yoga twice a week. And, you know, there was this great awareness around health. However, at a young age, I realized I internalized that and made it this strive for perfection. So I took my environment and took it out of context. Again, there was probably influences from media and being in an all-girls school and the pressures of that. And it's also a way of when we feel out of control, sometimes food is the one thing that we can actually use to feel like that we are in control of something. So that is what happened when I was in high school. I did develop bulimia and then later on anorexia. And it was this way of trying to grapple with stress and feeling like I had some sense of control in my life. Now I internalized that and didn't share that with anyone. It was kind of this internal struggle that I was going through, and that was reflected in other things that were happening in my life. There was some failed relationships, and all of the things that I was scared to share that were perceived failures were what I was hiding away. And it was because I hadn't learned that skill of vulnerability actually being a gift to other people. And it wasn't until later on that I started to go down the self-development and self-exploration pathways. And it was those moments where I really opened up, or where someone else really opened up, that I got this deep connection, which is what I really was craving all along. And so I went down the science path, partly because of parents' expectations as well. So, you know, they came from a generation where getting a degree behind you does create more freedom. It creates more possibilities. And in retrospect, I really appreciate that pressure that was put on me to have that as just like a fallback. It just took me into getting into my PhD like 8-9 years down the track. To realize that the motivating factors behind my choices were actually because of an external driving factor and not an internal joy. There was an identity that was created around health and wellness because that had occurred at a young age, because that was my environment and that was my conditioning. However, it wasn't until I was like in my mid-20s that I really sat with the question, like, who do I want to be and who am I if I'm outside of the context of the family conditioning or my society conditioning? And that's a really like...
Oh, I want to talk about that issue, not that issue, but that thing when you come into realizing, oh, I've been driven by people's external sort of ideas of what I should be doing. How did that shift really look when you started being like, okay, what do I actually want in my life? Like, what do I want to be doing? What did that look like when you started to sort of like redirect your life?
Well, I have to giggle at myself when we're talking about synchronicity. So my PhD topic wasn't necessarily chosen by me. Like it was recommended by my supervisors, and I resonated with it, so I went down that pathway. So there are different pathways within PhDs. Sometimes you can approach them, but the topic was actually working with a framework called self-determination theory, so people can look that up if they are interested. And it's the idea that our choices are governed either by more like intrinsic or autonomously driven, so we get enjoyment out of it, or we have a sense of identity that's wrapped up in it, so it is for us, or it's for those extrinsic reasons. So there's an external pressure, or you're trying to avoid a punishment or gain some external reward. Now, I immersed myself, the PhD was nearly 6 years. And it was about 3/4 of the way through that I was like, oh, I'm doing the same degree as my dad at the same university, but I'm majoring in my mum's passion of health science. Like
go figure. Where did this come from?
Yeah. Is this choice actually for me? And sometimes we just make our choices based on what's familiar to us. So there's no judgment there, but it was like, on the side of doing the PhD, that's when I really dropped into like acting. So I was assigned with an acting agent, was able to do that on the side. And I also co-founded the Liberators, so the social movement that we were talking about.
These are tapping more into your passions, is that right?
Yeah, passions, it's just the creativity and the self-expression and the uniqueness of embodying something that's outside of the norm. It's not like a job that I'm going to find advertised on Seek or the internet. It's like paving my own way, which, is definitely a lot more challenging sometimes. But the first step of that was going, I acknowledge and I identify that I have been giving some of my power away. And the first step was going, hey, I need to talk to every single person that I think has a role or perceived expectation and actually reclaim that for myself. So I talked to my parents, I talked to my supervisors, I talked to my friends, like anyone that I felt, just predicted that I would be finishing the PhD. And I literally owned, I was like, I need to take 6 months off. I don't know if I'm going to come back because I don't know if this is in alignment with actually what I want to do, and I need to create that time and space. And so I had that conversation with everyone.
How was it received?
The most beautifully. These are one of those moments where it's like everyone's just like, we just want you to be happy. And I'm like,
what? I just want you to be happy.
Yeah, I've been stressing about this for months, and like I'm gonna let everyone down, and I'm a failure, and all these like internal dialogue that's going on, instead of just being like, I'm just gonna have the conversation and see where it goes. And so I took 6 months off, and at that point I was touring America with Pete, doing some more social experiments over there, which I'm sure we'll get to a little bit later on as well. And it was in that moment that I had to sit and I had to reflect, and I got to the conclusion, like, I am someone that can be quite stubborn. And I wrote down a list of everything, intrinsic to extrinsic motivations of why I would want to finish a PhD, and the option of what would I do if I chose to give it up. And by the end of it, my stubbornness was like, no, I like to finish what I start. And so I went back, but I went back knowing that I couldn't put any resentment or like blame on anyone else. I was the only one that I could hold accountable for my choices. And so, it took probably another year after that, but it was on my own accord. And so when I finished the PhD, it was like, cool, I know I did this for me, regardless of if I used it or went into academia or not. And it turns out like the soft skills that you learn in research or perseverance, or who you need to become to finish a challenge like that, that ripples onto other parts of your life. So that was my PhD journey. And then, I have to be honest, like I've just trialed things for the last couple of years, so I've been a science communicator, and I've, helped on all sorts of event management, and just given myself permission to be like, if I was a teenager again and a choice wasn't given to me, I just need to give things a go, because a lot of the time we understand what we want by knowing what we don't want.
I feel like I need to know your human design now. What's your human design, if you know it? Oh, you don't know? Idea. Oh my God. I'm going to send you the thing afterwards, because I feel like you must be a 3/5, because you're like me. We have to try everything to know if we like it or we don't. And by trialing and quote unquote failing, it's not actually failing. It's just a redirection onto our right path. So yeah. And I think going through this journey, and I want to come back to your self-love and your body journey as well, but it's just so powerful to take back the ownership to ourselves and our own journey. And you actually find the energy shifts when you're showing up to, your uni classes. if you're doing it for yourself, you're like, okay, yes, I'm there, I'm doing it for me. We don't have that resentment building. So even just that, you know, can be transferred in so many things in your life. What are we doing for ourselves? What are we doing for other people? But
I will say with that, just from a science background, it's not also about downplaying extrinsic motivation. Sometimes we actually need that. Like sometimes a lot of the days where I was rocking up to do my PhD, the only thing with that was making me rock up was like, I get to call myself a doctor if I finish this, you know? So it's like, I'm going for that external reward, but actually that can be a really catalyzing motivator.
And a big strong yeah.
Exactly. I think it's just if it's a sustained thing and that's the only reason, then it's a bit different. But yeah, I don't want to downplay the importance of extrinsic motivation sometimes as well.
Yeah, 100%. No, I love that you touched on that. And I want to come back to your body journey and your journey with your eating disorder. And just like for anyone who's sort of going through that now, like how did you sort of come out of that period of your life? And were there any sort of tools or tips that you sort of, you know, really lent on in that time?
Yeah. So yeah, it started quite young for me, and it kind of came on and off, usually associated with stress. But there could be so many triggers. So one of the first steps is that self-awareness of when am I going into those patterns. I also did get external help. So I didn't do this all myself. I did enroll with counselors, psychologists, to actually support me and hold me accountable for the changes that I was wanting to make. So the first thing that really shifted for me was, you know, my mum breaking down, like scared for her daughter's life. And it was that moment of seeing the vulnerability of someone that you really love actually questioning, you know, what was going on, was really, really impactful for me. And, you know, it was in that moment in retrospect that I can realize, you know, I was craving that deep connection. And I go back to, there's a cool experiment with the rats. I think it's with cocaine. You're nodding your head like,
yeah.
you know
I know, I do.
about.
I've heard of this one. There's many experiments with rats. No.
Yeah. Well, so it's that the simple preface of it is if you give like a rat a stimulus or something they can get addicted to, they'll start to neglect their food and their self-care and just get hooked on the stimulant until pretty much they die, they kill themselves, because they get so addicted. Versus if you give a rat a stimulus, so like a playground to play in, they'll go back every so often, but really they have so much stimulation around them that they don't need to get hooked on something else. And so I started, when I heard that, I relayed that to the important cornerstones that really helped me. So community being one of the first ones. So having those people that have your back, you can call when you're like just having a shit day, really. I'm hoping I can swear on this.
So allowed.
Okay, great. I gotta just be real about it. Like, you know, we're all humans. We have like bad days, and just being able to like have a girlfriend or a close friend just be able to like hold you and just be like, hey, we're all good. Like, especially women supporting women, because you know, a large majority of women are going through some kind of relationship with their bodies. So community would be the first. The second is knowledge. So one of the things that I found really fascinating was looking at the reasons why I was eating. And so it was taught to me the 7 different types of hunger. So there's like sight hunger, so you might just see food. So a perfect example is if you're watching the TV and the TV characters are eating, you just want to start eating. Smell, so bakeries know this well, they'll waft the smell out, and all of a sudden, even if you weren't hungry before, you're hungry all of a sudden. There's taste. So the example I think about with this is like if you open a packet of chips and you're like, yeah, I only have 1 or 2, and then all of a sudden the whole bag's gone. It's like that's that taste hunger of like, keep going. You got physiological hunger, so your body's actually in an energy deficit and needs food. Macro hunger, so this is if you're like craving a particular macronutrient. So one of the examples I use for that is I love running. I'm a runner, so after like really long runs, my body might be craving a bit more carbohydrate because it has used up a lot of the glucose and glycogen in the body. 6 is mental hunger. And this one I found particularly important, especially with the bulimia, because there's so much of this planning and structure of, oh, I ate 5 hours ago, therefore I'm worthy of having food now. Or
So
it's lunchtime.
Yeah.
The rules. Yeah. So very much mental, or like, it's lunchtime, therefore I should eat now. Or it's, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. All of these mental associations that we have with food. And then our 7th is our emotional hunger. So that can either be, we're sad, we're upset, we're going to like food as a way of consoling ourselves, or it can be celebration. It's like, we go to the chocolate, we go to the champagne, it's like, woo, like, having fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just learning those 7 different types was me being able to go, oh, right now I am going into like mental patterns, or right now I am eating the whole packet of chips or chocolate or whatever it is. And so when you have that awareness, it then allows choice again, so it's just like, from there you can choose which pathway you want to go. So knowledge is the next one. And also creating some stillness. So for me, like, I've grown up around yoga, but all sorts. So that could be meditation, that could be going for a walk and just being with my own thoughts. I've been really getting into my floats recently as well.
Oh my God, I've never tried one. I'm like claustrophobic, so I'm sort of freaking out about them.
Yeah, you'll love it. It's like being in a womb. It's lovely.
So good. Yeah.
And it's warm. So those moments where I get to regulate my nervous system, because I am stimulated a lot. Like, I'm doing a lot of projects all the time. So sometimes we use food as a way to ground ourselves. And instead it's like, oh, have I not been, dropping into myself, to my internal world. And just being compassionate with myself. As I said that, I was like, that was going to be my last point, but then I was like, how can I go past dance? Like, there's something about like sexuality and sensuality that, like, whether I'm giving myself a breast massage or getting the coconut oil out, or having a bath or having a dance, and just really getting into like movement again, that is another tool that I actually use to get out of my own mind and back into my own body again. And I thought about another last one. I'm just going to keep coming with the tools. The last one is because I found for myself, when I was going into the eating disorder, my world went from like out here into like everything is thinking about me, how other people perceiving me, how, like, it was very self-orientated. And when I could step into experiences or creating things for other people, so whether that be poetry, social experiments, dance, like anything that was like, oh, I'm feeling something at the moment, but I'm going to use that to create or to serve other people. Or just going and listening to what someone else is going through. It's just a shift in the awareness away from self into, well, how can I show up for someone else right now? Or how can I create something that in the external world someone might be able to relate to?
And I think there would be a fine line between not ignoring what's going on in the body and really acknowledging it, but then, transmuting that energy into an energy of service and an energy of giving, which I think is so powerful. And I want to come back to something you touched on before. Well, 2 things. One, awareness is just, I feel like, key for everything. But the second, emotional eating. And it's something that I've, come across time and time again, and still to this day. When I'm really stressed, I'll tend to just go to the pantry and find a snack, rather than, actually being like, okay, what does my body need in this moment? So can you talk a little bit about, emotional eating and maybe some things that could actually help? This is a bit of a personal question here, but things that can help us, or tools that can help us with that.
Yeah. So I will preface, like, if you really want to go dive deep into this, then, enrolling like your counselor or psychologist. So I'm not a clinical psychologist. My PhD was looking at the relationship between exercise and food. So there are some links. But a lot of what I'm saying is coming just from like my own personal experiences as well, what I've dived into. The emotional eating does link into what we were just talking about, the tools before. The other thing is like giving ourselves permission to celebrate when we are. So, you know, you could be at the pantry, you've already had a couple of mouthfuls, you have that awareness drop in. And, you know, I'm like, yeah, I've got the awareness. I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing it. And it's like, actually, you know, you're not. Like, you're just like in that cycle right then. But the moments where you go, oh, I'm in it, I'm going to step away. Walking around the block, like, or, you know, having 5 minutes away and being like, yeah, if I still want it in 5-10 minutes and it's genuinely there, you know, that's a good little like self reflection time to drop in. Definitely. But if you are able to like stop yourself, then it's like moving away and like celebrating yourself, like give yourself like a bit of affirmation of like, hey, like it might not have been straight away, we're not perfect, but I was able to like catch myself. And if we keep reinforcing that, you've got your neurological pathways which are just going to keep getting reinforced, and you're going to gain more trust in yourself again. Because I think one of the biggest things we do, as soon as we start going into emotional eating, we then go into beating ourselves up in a guilt cycle afterwards for the fact that we have broken some like mental rule that we've put on ourselves.
Whereas if we nip it in the bud, then we can kind of be like, okay, we can celebrate it, we don't feel as bad. And actually just thought of, do you know Mel Robbins?
The name's ringing a bell.
Oh, she's amazing. So she has this 5-second rule, and I actually just thought of this while you were speaking, but she says whenever you catch yourself in a bad habit, you count down from 5, and then once you hit 1 or 0, then you put the thing away. And I use it with my phone a lot. I'm like, oh, I can catch myself in a scroll cycle. I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I put it down. But there's something psychologically in the counting down that distracts you and breaks the habit cycle, and then you actually have the power to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to put that away, or put that snack away, or, you know, put my phone away. So it's cool.
I like it.
Yeah. And it's good in the morning when you're jumping out of bed, you're like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and like jump out.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I was just trying to, the other point that I had with that, I've completely forgotten now.
Don't you worry, all good. It'll come back if it's meant to. But I want to talk about your public experiments that you've done, and I have seen these. I think you sent them to me, and they were on YouTube, and they've got millions of views, and they really, really struck a chord. So you did one on body image, and then the other one on beauty. Can you talk us through like the drivers for these experiments, like how they were sort of perceived, and really what were the biggest takeaways for you?
Yeah, so the first experiment was in London in Piccadilly Circus, and that was the one around body image. So I went into Piccadilly Circus, I put a blindfold on, I stripped down to my underwear, and I had a sign at my feet saying, I'm standing for anyone who's gone through an eating disorder or self-esteem issue like me. Draw a love heart on my body to support self-acceptance. And then I just stood there with my markers.
I have like tears in my eyes just thinking about how powerful that would have been. And like, what was it like when you were standing there and no one was drawing on your body for those first couple of moments? Or was it straight away?
Oh, petrifying. Yeah. No. Well, I like, to be honest, in those states, like time is like, doesn't make sense. It's like, it probably was only a couple of like seconds or 30 seconds or something like that. But it just felt like minutes that I was standing there, because I'd built myself up so much to this. It's, you know, you have to picture it was like Sunday lunchtime in London, in one of the busiest shopping areas.
Yeah.
I'm walking up the stairs, and London is not warm, by the way. So you know, so I'm like walking up. It was there was sun in the sky that day, but thankfully. But I've walked up the stairs from the train station, and I'm like, oh, there's families and kids here. There's people of different ethnicities. Like, you know, there's police walking around. Like, what are people going to think when I'm just about to get like pretty much half naked in a public space? Like my actual like thought patterns was like, I'm going to get arrested. I'm definitely going to get arrested. You know, it's because there was so much of this fear of the unknown that was driving. But so like it'd come to me like in meditation, and just felt so strong. Like it didn't actually feel like there was another choice. It was like, this is what you're doing.
Yeah. Or else.
Because I think it's also, Well, it's also for me, like one of my cornerstones or one of my driving values is courage. And if I don't have things in my life every so often that are an embodiment of courage or finding my comfort zone, there's just a dullness that starts to happen in life. And yeah, there's just not that richness or that real belief in myself of am I living a life that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
And so this was one of those moments of like, cool, this is an ultimate test of your courage, because you are looking at one of the things that you've been trying to hide for years, like your close friends and family know, but really you hadn't shared it publicly. And there's all of these, like, you know, my mind was like, oh, people are really gonna like judge it, you know, it's gonna be all of, you know, projected as like, oh, she's just getting attention, or all of these other, like, you know, thoughts were going through my head. But I kept just coming back to like, no, whether it's just for me or so, like, you know, there must be other people out there that are going to resonate with this. And like I was there for 45 minutes or so, standing standing there. And there was a couple of things that I'll talk into. The first was a conversation that I overheard with a father and a daughter. They're actually, if you watch the clip, I'm pretty sure one of them there is actually drawing the love heart. And the conversation, I'm going to paraphrase because my mind was a bit blurry by this point, but it was like, this woman is standing for the fact that everyone is beautiful exactly as they are. You're beautiful as you are, and I love you exactly as you are. And so this is this conversation with this father and his daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, words are often intended but not always spoken. And you know, I know my parents love me very much, but you know, for the next generation, with so much social media around and this comparison culture, having your parents affirming you all the time and just being like, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you know, that builds confidence in oneself and one's self-worth. So that was one. Another father actually reached out to me after watching the video, and his daughter was in an anorexic ward, and he'd shared the videos with the other parents with children that were going through anorexia, and that had given them a sense of hope. You know, it's hard. There is a high rate of people that go into anorexia or bulimia, like they don't come out the other side. And so by no means am I preaching like that I have the way, because the hard reality is sometimes we can't come back from it. But having a little spark of hope, you know, that's what really like touched me and inspired me.
100%.
And then the last one,
so worth it as well, standing there half naked, you know, in cold London.
I was crying most of it. But the other big one that I had to laugh on is, so we were doing social experiments the day before in London, and one of which was blindfolding ourselves, like with our hands out, and signs saying, I trust you, do you trust me, let's hug. So we'd gone into this culture. I mean, this was pre-COVID, so hugs and physical touch were
it was
a lot more of the norm. And I'd gone up to a cop and just being like, this was out without the blindfold, but I was like, this is what we're doing. We're talking about hugs. Like, would you be open to a hug? And the cop in that moment was like, no, that would be really inappropriate of me. Like, and like was just like very like, and a given, you know, there's probably a lot of rules that they have to go through in training. But it was very interesting. The very next day when I was doing the social experiment with body image, I'm midway through the social experiment, blindfolded, and all of a cop comes up behind me.
All that on your background of your website. Amazing.
Yeah. I was just like, hello, love. Just checking you got enough water. We want to make sure you're hydrated, and just checking that someone's in the crowd looking out for you. Me and my fellow officer just going to stand off the side and make sure nothing happens to you. That was a terrible British accent.
No, I love it. Yeah.
So they were there protecting me, and at the end of the social experiment, one of them walked up to me and was like, look, I take my hat off, but I've got really bad hat hair, so can I give you a hug instead? I was just like, this cop is coming up to me, creating this invitation of like, thank you, and had been this protecting factor the whole time. It was just like,
humanity.
But that's like the topic we were talking about before, is like vulnerability. When you are in your essence and you are showing your vulnerability in a way that like connects and inspires people, you can't help but create this little like vortex of community in that moment that you're sharing. And so that's what I found from the social experiment. It's had all these just little ripple effects from then onwards.
Well, I love that you're saying that this was done like 5 years ago, or 2015, so however many years ago, 7 years ago now.
Yes.
But it's refinding its way back into circulation, which I just think is so powerful. And you touched on social media being such a big thing, and we're constantly bombarded with, we should look like this and we should be doing this and, you know, wearing that. But just to have something so raw and so real and just like a message, you know, that would have touched everyone in the audience. I think everyone there would have had some level of self-worth, you know, self-love, body images, or, you know, anything like that. So it's just, yeah, what a powerful movement you've created. And the other one you did, just for anyone who wants to check it out, you sat there with a blindfold on, and it was something about beauty isn't what we look like. And you said, chop some off my hair.
Yeah.
So
the following year, so the way talking into courage again, I look at, well, what am I attached to as an individual? Like, what's my identity become interwoven with, and what serves me and what doesn't serve me? And one of the things that I noticed was like my femininity was wrapped up in this long hair and this image of having, to have like this long, luscious hair. And so I blindfolded myself. This was when I did the American tour, so this is the same time where I'm questioning my life and my, you know, PhD and just everything. And I was like, well, may as well shave my hair off, then that goes with it,
and go viral, who knows, you know.
So that one was blindfolding myself. Again, I like to blindfold myself because it makes it less about me as an individual and more about the actual message. Because I mean, some people that know it's me can tell, but a lot of people, like, it's just that taking away the eyes takes away an aspect of the individual.
And it helps them relate as well and like see them as you, which is part of the messaging. So no, I just wanted to say, like, something about courage. And what's the one thing that you've got coming up that you're like, oh my God, I've really got to tap into this sense of courage and strength?
Oh,
I didn't prepare this question, so this is a sly one.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I am definitely in that state around career at the moment, because so I was helping with external, so like event management or science communication. So I've had like a structure external to me that's kind of financially supported me, and now it's like, cool, I'm really stepping into my business, and my offerings are how I'm showing up in the world and how I want to support myself. And so that's just a constant day of reassessing, like, what's my relationship to my offerings, what's my relationship to self, like how can I serve and how can I just learn and grow. So yeah, I've kind of shifted from, I was doing it like part-time for a year or two, and now it's pretty much my full-time.
That's amazing. And that's
getting close to,
you know, in itself, stepping out on your own and leaving the sense of security of a job and going out and being your own sense of income and, you know, your own marketing team and all the things. So hats off to you. Well done.
Thank you. We're speaking to, so every so often, like if people are getting concerned, so every so often when I do need to fall back on financial security, I also fall into the fact of like, sometimes you just want to be able to pay your rent and all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes, you know, life shows you a completely different pathway to go down. So this is where I'm at, and just find it really exciting at the moment.
It's so good. Yeah. And I can just see your enthusiasm just pour out from everything that you do. So it's awesome. So to finish us up tonight, I just want to chat about the one thing that has changed your life. And it could be something as simple as a cup of coffee in the morning, or it's open to your interpretation.
Whew. I mean, those social experiments definitely have shifted a lot. I've talked into that. So I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is my partner right now. So Owen, I've been with Owen for 2.5 years, maybe close to 3 years, something in that range. And it's just like finding a really like committed, loving partner that meets me in so many different ways. I think that would have to be one of the the highlights in one of those moments, and I'm like, oh, I am a different person because he has come into my life.
That is so beautiful. And just seeing the photos of you guys, like you can just see the love in the photos. Don't you love that when you look at a couple's photos and you're like, I can just tell you guys are just made for one another. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Jae. And for anyone who wants to connect or perhaps book in the Erotic Blueprint coaching or any of your other offerings, how do they go about that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me, either on Instagram, so Jae_West4. You can go to my website, jaewest.com, or my Facebook page is Dr. Jae West. So all my offerings will be on there. I do regular, like every month, I do an intro online workshop. So that's probably, regardless of where you are in the world, that's one of your easiest ways in to just get a bit of an idea of the blueprints. Or there's other offerings that I have up there if people want to contact me directly.
Amazing. Well, highly recommend working with you. And I just want to thank you so much for your time and wisdom today. And yeah, being so vulnerable and sharing your story and your journey. I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So thank you.
Oh, pleasure.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in.